Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, IR in Focus. And in the next 20 minutes, we're going to be talking about sustainability and how corporations can navigate this complicated and ever-changing landscape. With me today is Michael Taschner. Michael Taschner is an executive director here at S&P Global Market Intelligence, and he leads the sustainability solutions team. He has over 15 years of broad experience in sustainable finance and risk management and in the implementation of national and international regulatory frameworks for banks, asset managers, and insurance companies. He is specialized in the definition and implementation of strategic solutions with a deep technical know-how and predominant regulatory frameworks. And welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Glad that you're here. Now, before we get started on our discussion today, for our listeners, can you go through what you do and kind of make that tangible for them, like providing an overview of your role within the sustainability business and how it contributes to sustainable investing?
Absolutely. So our division is called Sustainability Solutions, and I have the pleasure to head this solutions focused business. And the reason why it's called Sustainability Solution is that we pretty much bring together all the bits and pieces S&P can offer in that space. That means be it data, be it analytical services, literally all our intelligence which we have to offer. We put that together and offer solutions to clients due to the increasing amount of complexity and also of local and regional and global complexity. We bring that together to solutions and we offer a end-to-end solution to our clients.
Great. So you guys are kind of like the connective tissue that kind of like brings together all of the data sets and capabilities across S&P. Of course, S&P is very involved in providing sustainable data and very involved themselves in sustainability initiatives. But what you're saying is really like your team kind of like specializes in supporting corporations when it comes to their sustainability journeys.
Absolutely. Yes. So that is the focus. We bring together, as you said, we are doing solutions. So we are bringing solutions to the table. Solutions are multifold. They can have different focuses. They can have a focus of just literally fulfilling our regulatory requirements, but also meeting strategic expectations, meeting expectations of connecting the corporate strategy with the capital market, with, for example, other global initiatives, or just simply with some regulatory requirements. So this is pretty much what we are doing on a daily basis and where we are supporting issuers around the globe.
Nice. And so what are some common questions or issues that clients would bring to you? And how would you help them moving forward with those questions?
In most of the cases, clients ask for help in navigation. That said, navigations focus on putting all things in order. As mentioned earlier, the sustainability roadmap is a very complex roadmap. There are so many things out there and there are so many different standards out there that getting started properly, bringing everything in order and understanding what are the priorities is a key requirement in getting the sustainability journey done properly. That also means that we are supporting clients from the very beginning, but also clients alongside or along their journey in terms of getting started, accelerating the start, but supporting in the implementation, supporting in finding the right approaches based on benchmarks against their peers, based on benchmarking against the market as such. These are the key things that they literally follow the maturity of the market, the maturity of regulators, and your own ambition level.
Mm-hmm. Sustainability is kind of in an interesting place right now, where I think you saw kind of like a rise and swell of the term ESG being used a lot in the markets. I think you saw a lot of potentially like greenwashing, like companies immediately responding to that and saying, yes, we are sustainable. Yes, we are green, but really not putting anything kind of like behind that, right? Really no insight into what does that mean if you're green and what is your strategy there. And then I think it kind of has moved into a space now where it's like, hey, investors want to know the risks around things like energy transition. So you're seeing these regulatory bodies, right, respond to that. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, I think the term when it first came out, the ESG, kind of has been hijacked to represent something it's not. And I think that's mostly due to kind of like the lack of understanding of what it is and the components and why it's important. And I think also way too often you'll hear demystifying and ESG used together in news stories, which kind of tells me there's an indication maybe there's, again, like a lack of understanding of what environmental strategies, social strategies, and governance strategies really mean. So I wanted to kind of get from your point of view and in your experience, what are some of the common misconceptions or challenges surrounding sustainability?
You're absolutely right. So there is the topic of ESG and sustainability as such is also a difficult topic because there are, of course, there are different point of views. There are different understandings which might result in different interpretations. Let's call it greenwashing. There are different approaches. And most of that is caused because of, or used to be caused by a lack of guidance by standard setters, by national, international regulators. Luckily, we see that there is a very strong push for unification. This is happening now really across the globe for environmental related or climate related risks as such. And what most of us most of us are used to is the TCFD standards. The TCFD standards have been sunset to that extent that they have been transposed into the ISSB, IFRS S1, S2 standards. And now most countries or most standard setters in different countries, be it stock exchanges, be it regulators as such, they now use TCFD standards as their foundation. And there is very little gold plating, except, of course, a couple of standards in Europe. But the key principles are now these days all the same. And this is, of course, also supported by more prescriptive way how to disclose, what to disclose, and more clarity in why to disclose it, as the reason of why we are doing what we are doing and understanding the reason and the purpose is extremely important to do it properly and to avoid any misinterpretation.
Right. And I like how you're kind of bringing in some of the other sort of regulatory bodies that are trying to standardize this information and kind of bring us a little bit closer to home here for our listeners. So in March, we know the SEC passed its climate disclosure ruling, and previously they had passed cyber risk disclosures in 2023. And both of those are sustainability and ESG related. And both of these rulings were passed as a response to, investors still demanding and wanting more consistent and comparable and reliable information about those financial effects of climate-related risks and ESG-related risks and improve investor transparency over those. And so you mentioned a bunch of those various regulatory bodies trying to help investors. And it really, again, a lot of this is coming from demand from investors saying, hey, we do want consistent, comparable, and reliable information, because if we're going to make investments, we're going to want to know what's material to your company in terms of how it operates and how it performs. And this kind of goes back to your answer in the first part, right? So I asked you, what are some common questions? And you're really like, well, it depends on the company. This really is kind of a difficult landscape because it's so varied from company to company, sector to sector, market cap, or whatever markets you're operating in. So it definitely varies in terms of what a problem or issue a corporation may face. But when you have regulatory bodies passing disclosure rulings saying, hey, now you're going to have to report this for your investors, how do you adapt your approach accordingly when you have new rulings, regulatory rulings?
The good thing is that a very strong and logical approach in this whole exercise of ESG and sustainability. Because taking out all emotions, it is literally a risk management exercise. And we at S&P, we are very experienced in doing that, in supporting our clients alongside a really very structured way, because the way how the regulator wants both sides, actually issuers and financial institutions, to manage the topic of sustainability is to identify the material risks. This is also a key principle of the SEC disclosure requirements, that the identification of material risks is the foundation of everything. The next logical step actually is the quantification of it. That means to which extent is the business exposed. The third step, which also makes a lot of sense, I think, is to stress test the resilience of the corporation against those identified risks. And then, of course, you need to say, how do I manage those risks? How do I plan to mitigate these risks? Until when? And how do I achieve it? This is perfectly laid out in the TCFD principles, which are, as mentioned earlier, the foundation for literally everything which is out there these days. I hope that gives you an answer to this question.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think what I'm hearing is that, just echoing how I feel about sustainability and how I view sustainability, tying that back to it really is around risk mitigation and risk management. And risk management is really nothing new that we're expecting corporations to do, right? If we are going to invest in this corporation, we need to know the strategies and plans around mitigating any sort of risk that they may face in the markets. And I think that what we're seeing, especially with the swell around sustainability, a lot of that was driven by talking about the energy transition and how that's going to impact clients. But also flipping that, climate change is real and there are real risks to things like physical assets. So if you have ports or if you have a supply chain that you care about, you should care about how I operate today. Will I still be able to operate in this same way like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? So when I think about sustainability, it's more around how sustainable is my company? Can I cut it in the long term, facing all of these environmental and macroeconomic risks that we see in this global economy? So it's really, I like how you kind of tied that back to, it really is just risk mitigation, and the investors and regulatory bodies are kind of reacting to that and saying, hey, yeah, we really do need more disclosure and transparency around your strategies and how you're mitigating certain risks. And again, that concept is not new to investors or corporations. And then kind of sticking on this theme with sustainability, what role do you believe sustainability strategies will play in shaping the future of finance and investment, both in terms of risk management and value creation?
The simple answer is a very important role, because having a plan in place, how you deal with exactly those challenges which you mentioned, is key for not even investors, but I would say any stakeholder. They don't need to necessarily be shareholders, but any kind of stakeholders who is exposed to this issue or this corporate or this individual, as you would like to understand how are they dealing with risks, how they manage it, and how this impacts the mindset of the people I'm living with. As this is something which is really key. The real challenge which you mentioned, I mean, I very much like your statement to say risk management is nothing new. This is extremely true. This is actually the core element of doing business, to making risk-adjusted decisions. What is new, though, is that people need to understand, or actually decision makers need to understand, how climate reacts and how the environment reacts and what is actually out there. And giving you an example of saying, how should I know how my actions impact water scarcity? This is something which is new in people's mind. And therefore, if it's not a very obvious topic, then it is very complex. And the positive thing is that the more information happens, the more knowledge sharing happens, also the more regulators and standard setters are actively and positively contributing to this topic, the better it will be understood. And the more, using the term you used earlier, the more demystification is happening.
Right. And more like a fundamental understanding around what is needed and what you need to be able to prepare and show investors around those risks. Again, like at the end of the day, like we've been saying, it really just comes down to mitigating risk. So looking ahead, we've had a lot of activity in the past, I guess, year and a half with like the CSRD and the SEC passing a lot of regulatory rulings around this. And then what do you envision as like the next phase or the next frontier in sustainability investing? So I feel like, there's a high demand from investors to have availability and transparency into this information. We see regulatory bodies reacting to that. And we have companies now that are reacting to those, the ones that are not voluntarily offering this information, they're reacting to the regulatory disclosures that are being passed. What is next? What is the next frontier in sustainability investing and company performance? And how do you plan to kind of stay in the forefront of that?
So it is, let's say, it is a little bit less than reading the crystal ball, but still, of course, it's a big question. If we approaching this question in a structured way, is that now we are focusing very much on climate. But climate is only a minor part of only the environmental pillar. So that said, the environmental pillar covers climate mitigation, climate adoption, but then it covers water, it covers waste, it covers nature and biodiversity, it covers circular economy. And all these topics need to be approached. And this is what we are very much seeing. We now very much see a strong push from the nature direction. That said, more concretely, it is TNFD, so nature-related and biodiversity-related standards. That it follows exactly the same procedure as TCFD used to go. And similar activities are happening on all the other fronts as well. So the assessment of transition risk, which is nothing else than what is the impact to my business if I don't change, this impact will increase as standard setters or the standards of standard setters are increasing as well. And this happens along or across the supply chain. That means it's not only a local issue anymore, it is a global issue, or at least an international issue to the extent corporates are doing international business, because any kind of activity which can be allocated to a location or to a geographical area where certain kind of limitation or standards are applicable will impact the business. And this needs to be considered. This needs to be assessed.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Okay. So we are kind of running up on time here, and I like to close out these podcasts. I think we had a good discussion around a lot of the themes and trends that we're seeing in the sustainability place. But is there one piece of tangible advice or one little snippet? So if this listener kind of skipped through the entire thing, they're like, hey, I know there's a little good bit at the end here. What piece of tangible advice would you give our listeners today?
Get started.
Get started. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. If you haven't started, you're late.
Get started and make a plan how to get started in terms of what are the priorities, following a first thing first approach. Don't deny the topic, because regulators are actually taking an eye on it. And there are a lot of opportunities out there as well. So it's a good topic, and getting started definitely helps in getting on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. And I love how you plugged in at the end. I know our conversation was very heavily focused on risk, but there's definitely a lot of opportunities in this space, in this frontier as well. Okay, so that's all the time we have. Thank you, listeners, and thank you to my guest today, Michael Taschner. If you like this content, please subscribe and check out our past episodes. I'll be back next month with new content. Always open to hear your ideas or any topics that you would like for me to talk about. So let me know. But until then, happy listening.